Piastri's undercut wasn't just textbook, it was surgical. When he peeled into the pit lane on lap 40, the stopwatch told the whole story. 1.91 seconds. The fastest McLaren stop of the season. By the time his papaya orange car rejoined, he had cleared the crucial traffic window behind George Russell by exactly 7/10, giving him free air to push. On fresh mediums, his first full flying lap clocked at 1 minute 23.6, almost a full second quicker than Norris's previous tour. The timing screens inside the McLaren garage lit up green. For a fleeting moment, the Australian had done what every young driver dreams of. He'd beaten the system. Piastri wasn't ahead by chance. He was ahead because his execution, his stop, and his outlap were perfect. And yet, this triumph didn't feel like a breakthrough. The pit wall froze. Across the garage, Norris's crew braced for their driver's stop, knowing they needed perfection to maintain track position. But Formula One rarely deals in perfection twice in a row. The right rear wheel gun stuttered, 3.2 seconds. In that moment, the balance shifted. Norris rejoined just behind, the delta showing Piastri clear by 2.1 seconds at the line. That gap should have been decisive. In racing terms, it was justice. The quicker stop had earned the position. But on the McLaren pit wall, another calculation was running: championship points, media narratives, sponsor visibility. The voice crackled through Piastri's headset. "Oscar, let Lando through." Inside the cockpit, his silence said everything. 2 heartbeats of hesitation, then a clipped reply. "Copy!" And just like that, the undercut that should have defined Monza became the spark that could redefine McLaren's season. Because here's the question nobody on the pit wall wanted to answer. Did McLaren prioritise strategy or politics? For Oscar Piastri, the order to slow wasn't just a tactical call, it was a test of identity. The Australian is known for his composure, a driver who rarely lets emotion leak onto the radio. But at Monza, the hesitation before his copy betrayed something deeper. Drivers live in split-second clarity, and in that pause, you could almost hear him weighing 2 futures. The fighter who defies, or the rookie-turned-loyalist who obeys. History tells us these decisions scar careers. Felipe Massa yielding in Germany 2010, Mark Webber muttering not bad for a number 2 at Silverstone 2010. Nico Rosberg refusing to yield in Bahrain 2014, a battle that ignited a title war with Hamilton. Every choice becomes a reference point. For Piastri, Monza may have been the moment his reputation inside McLaren hardened into something he cannot easily escape. On the other side of the garage, Norris wore the weight of expectation differently. McLaren have spent years building him into the poster child. British, marketable, fluent in sponsor-friendly sound bites. He isn't just a driver, he's a brand. One tied to McLaren's image as Formula One's comeback story. That's why the team's explanation that Norris had earned the position before the pit stop rang hollow for so many fans. Because to the outside world, it looked less like fairness and more like protection. The real sting? Norris didn't need protecting. He's fast enough to justify his seat on merit. Yet every time McLaren tilts the scales, it feeds the perception that his results are manufactured. And perception in Formula One is as powerful as points, which leaves McLaren staring at a paradox. In protecting their golden boy, they risk undermining both drivers at once. And that paradox is precisely what the rest of the paddock pounced on, because within hours, the political machinery of Formula One turned Monza from an internal dispute into a championship-sized controversy. In Formula One, no controversy lives in isolation. By the time the checkered flag fell, rival garages were already spinning Monza into a weapon. Toto Wolff, the master of political timing, wasted no opportunity to twist the knife. His warning was simple. If McLaren could reorder drivers after a slow stop, where did it end? Bad tyre call, missed yellow flag delta. Every team error could now become justification for reshuffling positions. The implication was clear. McLaren had crossed into dangerous precedent. Verstappen, meanwhile, turned ridicule into strategy. Over his radio, laughter, sharp, cutting, the sound of a champion savouring weakness. Later in interviews, he softened the tone, but the jab landed. Mishaps are part of racing. Coming from a driver who thrives on merciless execution, it was more than banter. It was psychological warfare. Verstappen knows perception drives pressure, and he had just painted McLaren as a team too fragile to let racing decide outcomes. Numbers made the picture sharper. Before Monza, Piastri led Norris by 34 points. After McLaren's intervention, the gap shrank to 31. At first glance, trivial, but over an 8-race run-in, that delta equates to 3 positions per weekend. In a sport where margins are measured in hundredths of a second, McLaren had voluntarily cut their cushion to ribbons. Even the FIA, quietly, began fielding whispers. No regulation bans intra-team orders, but the optics clash with the sport's own narrative of let them race. Monza's echo was familiar. Austria 2002, Germany 2010. Both races still remembered less for their winners than for the team orders that poisoned them. McLaren's attempt to restore order may instead have created the season's defining controversy. And that brings us to the sharpest edge of all. How much damage did McLaren do to their own title campaign in those 30 seconds of radio? Because once the paddock smells weakness, they never let it go. Strip away the politics, and Formula One always comes back to numbers. At Monza, McLaren threw away more than just goodwill. They gambled with mathematics. Piastri's 31-point buffer over Norris looks comfortable on paper, but break it down, and the risk sharpens. With 8 rounds left, a single non-finish wipes out that margin. A single safety car in Singapore, a mistimed strategy in Mexico, and suddenly the protected driver isn't Norris, it's Verstappen, cruising with a double-digit swing. Trust is the invisible currency of a championship fight. And McLaren's radio order debited heavily from Piastri's account. Drivers know when the garage is split. Alonso knew it in 2007, when a rookie Hamilton refused to yield. Webber knew it in 2013, when Vettel ignored multi-21, and Red Bull's unity shattered. In each case, points were lost not because the cars were slow, but because the trust chain snapped. Piastri's silence at Monza wasn't passive, it was calculation. He obeyed, but the pause before his reply planted a seed. Next time, maybe not. And in Formula One, maybe not is a dangerous phrase. It means a driver weighing whether to follow orders in the heat of battle, when milliseconds decide whether teammates emerge side by side or in the gravel. The irony is brutal. McLaren believed they were protecting harmony, but in engineering terms, they introduced vibration into the system. Small at first, almost invisible, but over thousands of kilometers, that vibration fatigues the structure until something breaks. And here's the catch. Once broken, trust is harder to repair than carbon fiber. Because Piastri doesn't just drive for himself. He drives with a factory behind him, with sponsors, with fans, and every one of them is now asking the same question. Is McLaren really fighting for 2 drivers or only 1? In modern Formula One, the battle doesn't stay in the garage. It spills into the boardrooms, the media studios, and the sponsor suites. McLaren's papaya cars carry the logos of multinationals who invest not just in lap time, but in narrative. And sponsors despise narratives they can't control. At Monza, more than 80 million viewers worldwide saw Piastri yield, not to a faster car, but to a team order. That's 80 million potential customers asking whether McLaren plays fair. Media only sharpened the blade. British outlets framed Norris as the rightful heir restored to his throne. Australian broadcasters painted Piastri as the wronged talent. On social media, sentiment analysis showed a 32% spike in negative engagement toward McLaren within 24 hours. In a sport where sponsor contracts can exceed $50 million per season, perception isn't fluff, it's currency. And then comes the driver market. Contracts in Formula One are rarely ironclad. They're fragile instruments filled with performance clauses, exit triggers, and whispered options. Piastri, still early in his career, is one of the few young drivers rated as genuine title-winning material. If he senses a future locked in a number 2 role, rival teams will circle. Alpine lost him once. Mercedes, Ferrari, even Red Bull would not hesitate to test McLaren's resolve with an offer. That's the external cost of Monza. McLaren didn't just risk alienating one driver. They risked signalling to the entire grid that their internal hierarchy is fixed. In a championship this tight, stability is strength, but instability, it spreads like fire, and the flame may already be catching. Because if Monza planted doubt in Piastri's mind, what happens when that doubt turns into defiance on track? Monza was not the end of the story. It was the opening chapter of a tension that will follow McLaren to every circuit on the calendar. The next high-risk flashpoint arrives in Singapore, where strategy chaos is guaranteed. In the last 5 races there, safety cars have been deployed in 80% of cases, compressing gaps and magnifying every team order. Imagine Piastri ahead, Norris behind, and a late race restart offering track position as the only currency. Would Piastri obey again, or would instinct finally override obedience? Suzuka offers another test. High-speed corners punish aero imbalance, and team orders there often look like sacrifice. A driver yielding mid-race loses rhythm, heat cycles through the tyres, and sometimes 2/10 a lap for the rest of the stint. If Piastri refuses, he risks headlines. If he obeys, he risks reputation. Both choices are traps. The danger isn't theoretical, it's historical. In 1982 at Imola, Gilles Villeneuve felt betrayed when Didier Pironi ignored an internal agreement. That fracture split Ferrari and cast a shadow over the season. In 2016, Rosberg and Hamilton's refusal to yield escalated into a full collision in Spain, reshaping the championship. When trust fails, the track becomes the battleground, and the points tally the casualty list. For Norris, the risk is subtler, but no less damaging. If he continues to benefit from calls like Monza, his narrative shifts. From underdog to protected. From fighter to favoured. Fans rarely forgive perceived manipulation, and once a driver carries that label, it sticks. Which means the next flashpoint won't just decide positions, it could decide reputations. And reputations, unlike points, are almost impossible to claw back once lost. McLaren's modern journey has been one of rebirth. From their last Constructors' Championship in 1998 to the long winless drought that stretched 3,213 days between 2012 and 2021, the Papaya team rebuilt itself piece by piece. Under Zak Brown and Andrea Stella, they clawed back to the sharp end, reclaiming podiums, sponsors, and a reputation for innovation. At Monza, though, they stumbled into the very trap that has undone giants before them, choosing politics over purity. Formula One history is littered with teams that lost their way in the pursuit of control. Ferrari in the Schumacher-Barrichello era secured trophies, yes, but also built resentment that lingers decades later. Red Bull's Multi-21 saga in 2013 tarnished a dynasty still fresh in the making. In each case, the silverware remained, but the legacy was dented. Fans don't just remember results, they remember fairness. That's the tightrope McLaren now walk. On one side, the dream of becoming genuine title contenders again, fighting toe-to-toe with Red Bull and Ferrari. On the other, the risk of internal implosion, where one driver feels sidelined, the other feels discredited, and the whole project fractures under pressure. The numbers underline the stakes. Heading into Monza, McLaren sat just 28 points adrift of Ferrari in the constructors' standings. Every position swap, every team order isn't just about driver egos, it's about tens of millions in prize money. And with Red Bull still holding a 75-point cushion, McLaren cannot afford wasted weekends. Legacy, though, runs deeper than finances. If Monza becomes the defining moment of their 2024 campaign, McLaren could be remembered not for their resurgence, but for their missteps. And the cruel reality is that reputations stick. Just ask Mercedes. For all their titles, fans still debate Abu Dhabi 2016, when Rosberg and Hamilton's war nearly split the team apart. The question now is whether McLaren's Monza gamble was a one-off, or the first chapter of a pattern that could undo everything they've rebuilt. Strip the noise away, and Monza comes down to one truth. McLaren blinked. In the crucible of a championship fight, they chose order over chaos, politics over purity, control over competition. And in doing so, they exposed a fracture line that could run through the rest of their season. Technically, Piastri did nothing wrong. His stop was flawless, 1.91 seconds, the best of the day. His outlap was clinical, almost a full second faster than Norris's. He earned track position by merit. Psychologically, his hesitation on the radio revealed awareness. This wasn't strategy, it was hierarchy. Politically, rivals like Wolff and Verstappen smelled blood, reframing McLaren as fragile. And mathematically, the 31-point gap between teammates suddenly feels paper thin with 8 races left. That's the synthesis. Monza wasn't about one race. It was about the story McLaren is writing for themselves. Are they a team of equals, unleashing both drivers to fight? Or are they building their entire resurgence around one face, one narrative, one chosen champion? Because here's the dilemma. If Piastri resists next time, McLaren risk a public implosion. If he obeys again, they risk losing him altogether. Both outcomes carry scars, and scars last longer than lap times. So let's leave the question with you. Was Monza a fair correction of race order, or the moment McLaren sacrificed sporting purity to protect their poster boy? And if you were in Piastri's helmet, would you have obeyed or fought? Drop your verdict in the comments because this debate will not fade quickly.